Welcome to 246 Dino. Today's project, the induction system. You may remember that on here we had the Suzuki inlet manifold and fuel injection and what have you. A few options to go from there to where we need to be, including fuel injection and separate throttle bodies and what have you. But what I've ended up with, deciding to do, is three of those little things, which are made in Taiwan, 44 IDF Webers. Nice and simple. You just put fuel into them and turn the throttle and they work. Cheap, remarkably cheap. But I need to mount them up here somewhere. So we need an inlet manifold, and obviously quite a bit of reverse engineering to figure out where all these holes are in the top of the engine on the two cylinder heads, what the bolt pattern is and where they are relative to each other. But rather than try and measure down in the hole here, the easy way to do it is measure the inlet manifold. Inlet manifold like so, easy to get to with a vernier caliper, or not a vernier, digital caliper, and by measuring between all the holes, one way or other, and a whole lot of trig and what have you, managed to establish the bolt pattern there and there, which is the same, but back to front. And then from that, figure out where we're going to put the carburetors. You can't really see any detail there, but from all those measurements, that's a scheme of the top of the engine, which is sort of doing my head in, because measuring the inlet manifold you've got to turn it upside down and back to front, but I think I've got it about right. From that, these two bits of laser cut plate, one there, and the other one goes over there, but also the other way around, just to make it sort of weird for everyone. And to put the carbies on top, just put that there for a sec. As with all sort of V60 type things, V80 type things, there's an offset between the two banks, and the carburetor has to go a bit like that to make the manifold work. And you would normally, sensible way to do things, one manifold per carburetor, so that it sits up here and it goes to that port and that port. But the bolt arrangement here doesn't really suit that, because there aren't enough bolts to do individual manifolds. So I'm doing a weird thing, which is having, I'll put that over there, doing my head in. The carburetors up here, instead of being the full stagger of the ports, they're at 10 degrees, really mainly for the throttle linkage to work. And this plate takes the manifold, takes the carburetor, but all the holes on this one and the other one are wacky, because those holes are wacky, and then the whole thing's at 10 degrees. So the challenge of getting the spacing on the manifolds left and right correct to have the carburetors in the right place and the right rotation. Quite a fair bit of maths. Designing the jig's been a nightmare, but we'll see how we go. Here's our manifold jig, based on a lump of 6mm plate, some angle iron bolted to it, some 6mm plate to mount the carburetor flanges, and on this side the plate that goes along the top of the engine. And we need to join them with a bit of 2-inch aluminium tube, like so. All three different, because they're all at different angles. And to suit the shape of the port in the engine, I had to make it triangular with a little bit of a press tool. But with a bit of trig, got those at the right length and the right angle. First one goes in there, see what we achieve. So simple as, to make a round bit triangular, that's a chunk of, I guess that's 12mm plate that I bandsawed out with a little V in it. Just let me check which way this goes. check twice, squash once. It sits in the vise like that. The black line denotes which the orientation. Bear with me here, but I'm not going to rush it for the camera and fuck it up. Ooh, I just said fuck. Sorry about that. Out there, I reckon. Give it a squish. Like so. Triangular. And a thumb with a hammer and pull that out with a shifter and it'll be triangular enough. Well, there's the beginning of our left-hand side manifold, removed from the jig, just with a couple of tacks on it here and there, which check twice, weld once. So I'll just pop it on the engine and make sure it looks like it's going to be okay. So there's the engine. I sort of knew that was going to go on. There's your carburetor. Which looks like, obviously the first carburetor is going to fit on the first manifold no matter where you put it, but it looks like it's in the right place. Rotated 10 degrees in the middle of the two banks. Every cause for optimism, and we shall continue. Here's our little manifold sitting in the jig, coming right along. Now for those two cylinders, we've been able to get away with a bit of angled tube to get from the carburetor to the inlet port. But this one's too far to do that. It's 40 mil or so. So we need a different solution. We need an S-bend, so to speak, and it's too tight a radius to make it by bending a bit of tube. Luckily the solution is to hand in the form of a couple of aluminium spinnings, which you weld together to make a donut, non-edible, and cut it up accordingly as required. Here we are with one manifold on and the beginnings of the second manifold on. Judgment Day, we get to see how we've got on. There's the carburetor. Straight on. How's that? Every reason to continue. Here's our little engine, looking nice and shiny because I've had the cam covers vapor blasted. Remarkable finish on them, which would have taken me, well, it would have been impossible any other way really. That's nice. And in here you can see two fabricated inlet manifolds which have come out of the jig and been bolted to the engine, and they needed quite a bit of thumping with a big hammer due to the welding distortion to get the flanges back in the right place. And now I can show you something cool. And now, I'm going to show you something cool. Watch this. One. Two. Three little Webbers sitting on top of a Suzuki engine, which I reckon looks pretty cool. One day they'll all get linked together. As soon as you do this, they'll all do the same thing. There you have it. Carby's done. 246 Dino, new subject, water pump drive. Suzuki have quite cleverly put the water pump inside the engine, which saves it poking out here, like many engines. Just makes the thing nice and compact. Thank you, Suzuki. And there used to be a belt around there, obviously around the crankshaft pulley, and around some sort of alternator and some sort of air conditioning pump or something. Great big thing. We don't need all that. But the pulleys are quite nice, and obviously I'm stuck with this one if I'm going to run the harmonic balancer. So this is quite an unusual tensioner, which I've never seen elsewhere, but it's got a bolt to hold it on, another bolt with a slot in it, which means you don't need an adjustable bracket, you just have two bolts and adjust the pulley. It's quite nice. And using some existing lugs on the engine to make a bodged up bracket, I can do this. One bolt to hold it on, and the bolt to adjust it. Now the reason that's such a big old thing, I want to use that, there are 3 bolts here for an engine mount, so I'll incorporate that into it in one fell swoop. And instead of the great big long ugly belt, we use this little thing, which is off something else, origin unknown. It goes around there like that, and we have a water pump drive. And now the only thing with that, slight compromise, that pulley's smooth, doesn't have grooves in it, and it's running on the inside of the belt. But that's, the engine goes that way, that's the power side of the pulley. The tension's quite low, the pulleys are huge, I've done it before, it'll be fine.